Good morning or slash afternoon, everybody. My name's Julian O'Shea, and as mentioned, I'm dialing in from beautiful Melbourne, Australia, which, for those that haven't been, is a pretty great city to live in. I certainly love it. And I'd like to start by acknowledging this is also the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders. So this presentation is kind of the end of 3 years of work for me. I literally pressed submit on a PhD this week from the Mobility Design Lab at Monash Uni. I thought I'd share a bit about kind of my journey, my adventure, which is all about this kind of idea of storytelling when it comes to transit and transport systems. Folks, let's make it interactive. If you've got any questions or thoughts or comments, just mush letters into the chat. It's meant to be interactive and fun. And I'll also try to finish early to have a bit of time for a bit of banter. So my story and how I got into this world, I am up for a silly adventure. My background is in engineering and design. So I traveled a bunch and had a good time kicking around Southeast Asia. And the streets of Bangkok are full of these things, rickshaws or auto rickshaws or tuk-tuks. Tuk-tuks is what this one's called. And I just thought, we don't have these at all in Australia. And I thought, well, wouldn't this be cool? They're really great urban vehicles to be zipping around a city, but they two-stroke engines and they're polluting and they're loud. So my idea was this: wouldn't it be fun if we built a solar-powered tuk-tuk? And over the course of the year, I did exactly that. Now, this is a much bigger one. It's a limo edition, built in Bangkok, Thailand. And I worked with a uni group here in Melbourne, and we put a battery in there. There's a Tesla battery inside that. It's decked out in solar panels. And we used it as an outreach project. So this silly vehicle, we drove from Melbourne to the Great Barrier Reef, which is over 3,000 kilometers at a top speed of 50 kilometers per hour. Which is pretty dang slow, to be honest, and around a couple of hundred Ks per day. It took a month to do a trip you could probably do in 3 days. But what was amazing is just how much people responded to this. Kids loved it. We'd talk to all of these politicians and councillors about sustainability, about renewable energy, and the media thought it was great. We're on every ABC, which is our national broadcaster, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, radio station from here to the Great Barrier Reef. And this was just a silly, fun project that I thought would be a good time. But seeing the impact that it kind of had and the reach it had in particular really got me thinking. And that's kind of where my PhD research kicked off. So this is kind of what my PhD has been a bit around. And going into it, I thought it would be around. There's just this space, I think, for transport. Cars are massive and heavy and they don't fit into cities. Lighter urban mobility, like, something between a bicycle and a car is kind of where I was really interested in. And I had this idea that if we invented new and cooler forms of e-bikes and cargo bikes and scooters and got people excited about them, it would change transport. And I think I was fundamentally wrong. I think that the bicycle doesn't need much of a redesign. I think that electric cargo bikes are the future of transport. Add them with trains and buses, and we're going to have a sweet, sustainable city system. My lesson was that people don't ride these things because they don't feel safe, because there's not the infrastructure and connecting systems to really make them work. So I went on my own journey and kind of thought that it was a technology problem, and I really think it's more of a policy issue. And that's where my kind of research took a bit of a turn. There's some of the weird vehicles that I've designed on screen now. The other thing to note is that over the last 3 years, we've been in pandemic mode. Melbourne was one of the lockedest down cities in the world, and there were months that we were only allowed within 5 kilometers of our house. So what I did is, because I had this idea that I would be going on these big adventures with big crowds of people, that obviously didn't happen. So I started making educational content online on all of the social media platforms, but primarily YouTube. And the stories had a very Melbourne focus, and that wasn't by design. It was by the legal mandate that that's as far out of the house as we could go, and educational, like factual storytelling about these topics. And I want to kind of show you how that work is kind of linked in to this work around transport systems as well. So this is an extract from around kind of policy reform, and it's a kind of linear basic model. But basically it says that if you're trying to create change in a kind of political system, these are the different steps. Like, is this a topic that people are even talking about at all? Like, is this on the agenda or not? and then what is the decision point that you want to make that you can kind of advocate for, and then if that's the case, does it get rolled out successfully or not? Then you have to restart the process. And it's been really interesting to be part of one of those processes that has happened in real time. About 3 years ago, electric scooters in all of their forms were not legal at all in the state of Victoria, and we're going through this process at the moment with a electric scooter trial, which has been incredibly used. And just recently, what does it say? Last month, they've legalized personally owned electric scooters. So it's really been interesting to be part of that process, being kind of an academic, a researcher, putting out information into the world that communicates this stuff effectively, because the news is all about novelty. So if someone gets hurt on an e-scooter, that is newsworthy. If someone gets hurt in a car, it's not necessarily newsworthy. And so you'll see articles like, there've been, a dozen injuries on electric scooters, and being able to provide rigorous, thoughtful kind of responses to that, that say, yep, that's true. And, we should make these things as safe as they can be, but also let's look at the wider systems and kind of put them in comparison. So policy change is something that I'm getting increasingly interested in. But what my research was about, and I think this is a tool of the many tools that we can kind of talk about to try to design better transport systems, is doing things for the explicit reason of having public conversations. So as I said, I don't think the solution to a lot of this stuff is around new forms of technology. I think that trains are brilliant. I don't think that we need to be zipping around in hyperloops. I think that a lot of technologies out there, so it's around political will to really make things happen. So just share a couple of the projects that I was involved with and some takeaways that you folks might find useful as you kind of, try to create changes in your own cities. So this project was called the Yarra Plastic Paddle. So Yarra is the river that goes through the city of Melbourne. And we partnered with a local not-for-profit organisation that really aims to care about the river. This project was less about the transport systems, but all of my research was around how do we use vehicles to kind of engage. So this one was all around, having a quality riverway running through our city. So what we did is we built this plastic bottle kayak and paddled it, I forget how far, maybe 15 kilometers down the river, finishing right in the heart of the city. And this is novel. This is interesting. This is something which grabs attention. So I got featured in the major newspaper, The Age here, and had a chance to kind of talk about river health and what it's like to have a quality riverway in a city. Another project I did was during World Bicycle Day, which happens in June every year. And what we did is we partnered with the ABC, the national broadcaster. There's Nate, the weatherman, on the morning breakfast TV show. 4 of us jumped on a quadricycle, which is a 4-person, all-pedaling 4-wheel bike, and we aimed and set a world record for the fastest 10 kilometers on a quadricycle. And the bit that I found really interesting was, one, just the coverage that this got. Like, there was both, morning breakfast TV, which is all very, light, but also got featured by the news. But because this was on the agenda of the producers, there were a lot more conversations than just our silly world record. They, for example, cut to the cameraman who rides to work every day, and he spoke about, exactly the things I wanted to talk about. The need for good infrastructure to enable this kind of transport and how it needs to connect to get transport systems. So the takeaway is this. We live in this era where there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of content, there's a lot of stuff. But at the same time, there's a lot of slots to fill as well. Like, imagine being a 24-hour news channel. That's a lot of just moments and opportunity. So this was, the kind of thinking is, if you do something novel and interesting, it will grab attention. And one of the biggest features to that is if you do it novel and attention grabbing in location, in the place where you want to be having these conversations, it's even more so. So I want to kind of talk about how this stuff can lead to the change that you want to see in your transportation systems. So we, perhaps like most cities, or at least many cities, one of the big topics is bikes and bike lanes. And I kind of want to show you a bit about what my work looks like. I'll just show one video and kind of my approach to it. So I'm making educational content, and I'm doing it around design in cities. So kind of one of my approaches, if something is like interesting and good, I'll share about it. And if it's not, I'll kind of describe why it's not. Because I think a lot of people know what a good street feels like, and they know what a good city is, and they know what a good functioning transportation system is, but they might not know why. And what my work tries to do is explain some of that. So I'll show you one of my videos now. Shout out if the sound isn't working, and I'll... So I've got a new bike lane on St Kilda Road, and here's why it works and what it takes to make a good bike lane. Now, not all bike lanes are the same. At the lowest level is having none at all, followed by what's called sharrows, which has got a picture of a bike lane on the road with no separate space. The next level up is maybe a painted bike lane, but with no physical protection, followed better by some kind of temporary protection. But here we have the highest level. That is a physical barrier stopping the cars from engaging with the bike lane. Now, another feature about why this works is where you can see the car parking is. As you can see, it's physically removed from the bike lane. What you'll sometimes see is that the bike lane is adjacent to parked cars. Now, the downside of that is what's called dooring. That is when someone in their parked car opens the door and it hits the cyclist. Where there are side roads where cars might be coming in, you can see they've painted it green. That's a visual indication that it is a bike lane, as well as specific signs to say, hey, there's a bike lane ahead. And I think there's been some good design here about where the bike lane interacts with a pedestrian crossing. So what they've done is they've used a bump out to move the pedestrian crossing forward so that pedestrians don't have to spend as long in the way. They've put in this area here where there's no car parks. That's called daylighting, so any cars driving by can see the pedestrians. What they've done that works quite well is even though there's a bump out, they've still kept the bike lane separate from the car lanes. You'll see sometimes that where there's a bump out, the bike lane kind of merges in with traffic, which isn't great if you're a cyclist. Whereas this kind of solves that. I'm Julian O'Shea. Follow for more city design. So that's kind of what a Julian O'Shea video looks like. This one very much filmed on my phone. I've done some higher production stuff on my YouTube channel, but seriously, it's not complex from a production point of view. Now, an observation in doing this is that, now I know some of you folks are from New York City, but many of you aren't. And I think outside of perhaps Los Angeles and New York, most cities are underrepresented in the media. I live in the most populous city as of this week in Australia, and it's still special for me to see Melbourne on a screen. And because so many of these apps are location-based, if you make a local video, it will get shared locally. And people love it. They love to see their city and town on it. So even if they weren't interested in the topic, there's a good chance they'll be a bit hooked to be like, oh, I know that place. I've been there. What's this about? So it kind of really, I think, spreads more than, it spreads a lot. Like it actually spreads a lot, and it spreads a lot often within the communities that are most important. People care about this stuff. So on the right-hand side there is an extract from a news article where the city of Melbourne was going to slow the rollout of these cycle lanes. To be fair, they'd rolled them out faster because of COVID, so that actually made a lot more progress. They were going to kind of press pause. And I think they thought they were, this would be seen as a positive thing amongst businesses. But there were 1,000 written submissions about this, and they pretty much all 99% said no, bike lanes are really important. For comparison, the average item on the City of Melbourne roster gets 2 submissions. So this was remarkably kind of well received, and a bit of storytelling like this can really help. So I've got a new bike. Now, this is incredibly kind of hot topic. This our Murdoch paper, which is the Herald Sun here in Melbourne. They don't like bike lanes. I just went to the news site before this and typed in bike lanes, and these are the articles. So this is kind of what there's similar things pop up when you talk about new train stations and the like. We've got a big project where we're separating level crossings, and again, there's this concern about like raising up them. This idea of Skyrail. So you can see that there's kind of this big push, I guess, of people that really don't like this stuff. So having different voices is quite important. So the other thing I want to kind of share is that unlike, broad TikTok views and YouTube views, some of this stuff, it's not about the number of views, it's about who sees it. And again, like my stuff is mostly seen by people in Melbourne or Australia, and that's totally fine for kind of the stuff I'm making. But even more so, I've made very, very, very niche videos, and they've not been seen by, millions of people, but a lot of them have been seen by people that are so connected to it, which is kind of what you expect. I made a video about the pedestrian crossing buttons in Melbourne. You press them and they make this kind of boop, 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 boop sound, which is quite interesting. There's a lot of interesting design in it. And I shared it on LinkedIn, and you can see the companies that have shared it most. And the two biggest places where it was seen was the company that designed and built, and the company that commissioned this piece. So that's the other feature, that your stuff might be seen by people who are really key to it. So for example, on the right hand side there, that video that you just saw was acknowledged by the member of parliament whose area this runs through. And I didn't share it directly with them, but the city strategic and transport safety planner gave me their very, very kind of boomer-esque, here's a JPEG GIF of a thumbs up guy. But clearly this has gone to the people that are making the actual design decisions. So I just want to say that this stuff can have impact even if it doesn't have big and broad numbers. So just to kind of show you the types of things, these aren't videos, I'm not going to show them, but these are just kind of the topics that I've made videos about. Are a lot of things kind of explaining, I've picked the ones that are most kind of explaining about transport and design systems. But I have tried to make them hooky. So hooky as in like to capture attention by people who might not normally watch this. So on the bottom left-hand side is a YouTube video. And what it was about, what was the title? Something like why Melbourne's biggest street was wiped off the map, which is, good, nice and clickbaity. And the premise is Swanston Street, which is arguably the main street of Melbourne, does not appear in any detail on Google Maps and Apple Maps, even though it is the #1 tram route on the entire Earth. More trams and people on trams move down Swanston Street than anywhere else on planet Earth, but it's not on a map. And the story goes that maps are designed by how many cars they move. So highways are the biggest on Google Maps, and then like roads are the next biggest, and then lanes and streets are smaller, and then pedestrian only areas, which this is, don't appear at all. So that's the other thing. I try to make stories which can be engaging for the public. So that video that you just saw, there's no language in it that like a 10-year-old wouldn't understand. Like, it's accessible. It tries to explain it in a way which is engaging, but is also trying to get some point across. Wombat crossings in Australia, that's what we call raised pedestrian crossings. And the Patton Street talks about a shared street which exists here in Melbourne. So I'm going to try to finish a bit early to have some time for questions, but I'll just share one or two projects and findings. I set a world record on a quadricycle, but I have done it on transit as well. I once went to China, who famously have the world's biggest fast train network, to set the world record for the greatest distance traveled on train in 24 hours. I set it, someone beat it, I went back to China and set it again. So I went, I think, 4,800 kilometers the second time, different certificate, on trains in a day. So, doing something like that, that'll get you on the media, that'll get you on the local news, that'll let you start to talk about some of these things. So yeah, be a bit creative in what you do, and I think there's plenty of opportunity to it. Now, I'm not going to talk through this, but I am going to show it. I know this is, I believe it's being recorded. Why am I showing it? Because I spent 3 years trying to get these findings. But these are some of the explicit takeaways about designing these outreach and engagement projects that I thought I'd share. I'll just pull out a couple of them, perhaps. So understanding what the goal of the project is really key. So doing something and having something which links quite closely makes a lot of sense. Being in a plastic bottle boat, talking about plastic pollution has really strong alignment. I've done a lot of projects with different forms of vehicles, which is one approach. You can do one where you create something new, a solar powered scooter or something, or you can use an off-the-shelf vehicle and make the project about doing something interesting with it. For example, a group of Icelandic women rode electric scooters around the country, and it was all around telling stories of their home country. Defining the route can be really important in both the size and the scariness of the project, like how ambitious it is. There are people that have ridden bikes around the world, and there are, we did our plastic bottle project and started finished in a day. Now, I've researched a bunch of these projects, both ones I've done and other people have done, and having one or two champions, like people who really want to make this project happen, is how they happen. More so than having a big team of people that are kind of interested. That can be important to help bring a project to life, but getting a champion can be really useful. And then finally, as I said, the hook can be really key. If you can find a way to engage and connect people, particularly the media, then you can start to have some of these conversations. And an important part of this can be that um, you may have some expertise and knowledge. So I try to really, counter disinformation when people are concerned about where projects are at and that, these things are viable. So look, that's the end of my talk. I'd love to have some Q&A, so please chuck some questions in the old chat and I would love to answer them. There are my details, so feel free to grab a screenshot or a photo of that. And I think these slides will be shared. I'm happy to share them. But chuck some questions in the chat, please, and we can have a bit of a chat or thoughts that you folks have got as well.